Me again, Louise Hvala, and we are back for another episode of Gatehouse Insights. In this episode, I'm finding out about mental health and wellbeing in the legal profession, how employers can assess whether they have created an effective culture of wellness in their company, and what companies could do to open up the dialogue up even more to create a safe place for people to speak up. And who else to better shed a light on the topic other than Natasha, who is passionate about removing the stigma around mental health within the workplace. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. You are really passionate about mental health within the legal profession and within the workplace generally. And you're passionate about removing the stigma associated with it. Can you share your views on this?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to realise that about 1 in 5 people suffer from a mental health disorder or illness, and there's a stigma in the workplace, unfortunately, with discussing that mental illness or health disorder. So particularly in the legal industry, I think it's important that we try to remove that stigma so that people feel more comfortable to be able to speak about what they're going through. And unfortunately, there's sort of this cookie cutter approach as to how a lawyer should be or how a lawyer should perceive to be. And we need to really, I think, shift away from that paradigm and into a space where lawyers can feel like they can be themselves and discuss what's going on.
Yeah. From your experience, what have you seen to be the best program implemented by companies?
It's a tricky one. To be honest with you, at this stage, I don't think there are any fantastic programs. It's great to see that most law firms have an EAP or employee assistance program that they offer. And that's pretty standard these days. It's sort of a confidential counselling service, which is great. And, you know, they'll have your sessions on, people building or team building, or they'll have the bullying, harassment, discrimination policies, but there's not really anything around emotional intelligence, which I think I'd like to see a bit more, and people being able to express their feelings and feel psychologically safe.
There's a lot of talk from firms and companies generally they have this mental health program in place. Do they really, or is it just a tick box?
I think it's a tick box. Of course I'm generalising, but and I think some companies do it better than others, but unfortunately it is still very much a tick box approach to mental health and wellbeing.
Yeah. You were speaking before about Deakin University and the amazing workshops they run.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what they're doing in the workplace to help people with these issues?
So as I mentioned, I think emotional intelligence type workshops are really the way of the future in terms of getting in touch with your employees and understanding them on a more intimate level. And as I said, last week, Deakin University ran one for my division, and it was just about sharing your feelings and opening up a safe space with your colleagues and your managers, and yeah, it was remarkable. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Did anyone hesitate during that process?
Yeah, I think everyone's got their own comfort level, but again, by removing that stigma associated with discussing things, whether it's a mental health condition or just, you're having a tough time, by slowly removing that stigma and making it feel more normal, people will feel safer to share. And then in turn, we'll have a more happy culture and a more sharing culture where people feel supported and safe.
Yeah. How can employees and even managers assess whether they have created an effective culture of mental health?
I think it's really hard, and I think I was saying to you before, it starts at the top, and the managers need to be trained in emotional intelligence and things like that, where they can identify or see those signs in their employees where, someone's maybe not their usual self, or they're introverted or reclusive, or they've gone inward, and there's a reason for that. And I think in terms of changing culture, as I said, it starts from the top, but also just generally creating a culture where employees feel safe to share amongst themselves and create that bond, and create that culture of inclusivity and feeling supported and safe and happy.
If you're seeing one of your team members going through or changing or going more inwards, and you're seeing there's a bit of a shift in them, At what point do you approach them? What do you say? How do you tackle it from that point of view?
It's a really tough one. And as a workplace relations lawyer, there are boundaries, of course. But I think, look, at the end of the day, lawyers are humans, despite popular belief. And it's about just, as you said, seeing that someone's acting different and maybe just starting off with a soft sort of conversation. Is everything okay? Do you want to have a coffee? Do you want to, talk about anything? And just sort of those initial questions. And allowing the employee to share what they feel comfortable in sharing. And I think if the employee shares something a little bit more that you might be concerned about, it might be time that you involve HR and you say, look, we're going to have perhaps a confidential conversation where we discuss some support that we can offer you. But every employee is different, so it's really about navigating through that as well. Yeah.
In terms of HR, what do they do in that sense? What can they do?
It's different in every situation. I think a good HR practitioner will read the situation and try to offer the support that is best suited to that employee. And it might be just a conversation. It might be walking around the block or grabbing a coffee with the employee, or it might even be offering the employee assistance program or some other support as well. It might involve having a discussion with their manager that perhaps the employee doesn't feel they can have, or a facilitated discussion. There's a lot of options available and there's sort of not one size fits all, but I think as long as they're there and they're helping the employee feel like they're being heard, that's key, I think.
Yeah. In terms of an employer or manager, how do they tackle a situation if they're going through their own mental health problems? How do they take that
I wish
on
I had
board?
the answer for that one.
Yeah.
Look, it's tough. And I think that's where perhaps a third party like human resources practitioner is probably good to get involved. It's difficult to get to the situation where you're getting someone else involved that's not sort of already putting the manager in a place where they don't feel comfortable or they feel like they're being attacked. So it's a really tricky one to navigate. And again, I think it comes back to starting that training at the leadership level and helping managers self-assess where they might not be doing things in a way that is being received very well by their direct reports.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of opening the dialogue up further within an organisation, so it's almost a safe environment for people to speak, how does a company go about allowing and saying it's okay to speak with others within the team if you've got an issue or you're not feeling right?
Yeah, I think it's just that, to be honest. I think if your manager is open and transparent and models the right behaviour and then encourages you to share as well, that's a start. And every team dynamic is going to be different and every person's different in what they want to share. But as long as you're creating that safe space where employees feel psychologically safe to share to the extent they want to, then I think that's the right approach. Yeah.
And workload is a contributor to stress and being tired and mental health. What can employers do to address this problem?
Yeah, unfortunately, as you probably know, the World Health Organization has recognised burnout as I think they called it a occupational phenomenon. And particularly for lawyers, it's obviously something we experience with high workloads and that sort of thing. And I think it's about, again, from the managers or even just the senior members of a team, being there, supporting their direct reports or their colleagues and recognising, if someone is perhaps acting a little bit more negatively in the workplace or they're retreating or they've gone quiet or perhaps they're just not managing their deadlines, whatever it is, recognising that behaviour and having a chat with them and just saying, is everything okay? Do you need some support? Is there anything I can offer? And then as a firm as well, I think law firms, are doing a lot of it in the right way and in the sense of offering physical activity teams, sports teams and that sort of thing. But I mean, I'd love to even see more around mindfulness in the workplace as well and just offering that support from various angles.
At what point, because I know a lot of employees think if they're struggling and they put their hand up, they might be looked bad upon or they might be terminated. How do they get past that barrier?
It's really hard, and I think the issue is because of the stigma. Unfortunately, a lot of employees, as I said, 1 in 5 people who are suffering from mental health will just not be heard and they'll suffer in silence. And it's about some employees having the courage to speak up and perhaps try to address the issue if they feel that they can. But unfortunately, the climate that we're in, I think, is still a climate where employees will just resign and try to find a place that is more supportive. Yeah.
What's one thing firms should do that they could implement straight away to help their
I think
teams?
training managers at the moment. I think, as I said, I really think that starting at the top and sort of that training filtering down to staff is the key to improving mental health and removing the stigma associated with discussing mental health in the workplace.
Yeah. And do you have any final thoughts on health and wellbeing within the workplace generally?
Yeah, I think, look, as I said, for me at the moment in the current climate, there's a stigma, and I think the only way we can remove that stigma is by having this conversation and conversations like this and opening up the dialogue so that employees and other people who I'm sure feel the same but just don't share it, feel safe to share what they're going through. And eventually we can normalise those sorts of conversations.
And I suppose it doesn't necessarily need to be within the company or the firm. It could be, say, an external group of people that you could speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of excellent support groups, initiatives. You know, you're seeing seminars. I myself have been in a couple where people are talking about what they're going through or sharing how they work through mental health related conditions or where they're burnt out and the strategies around that. So yeah, there's options out there. I'd love to see more, but I think all we need to do is just keep focusing on doing those sorts of events and keeping the dialogue open. And eventually I think it'll change. But yeah, it's a paradigm shift in the way we think about how we need to be as lawyers, and we will get there, but there's still some work to be done, I think.
That is the end of this episode on mental health and wellbeing in the workplace. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel, where you can explore the wonderful world of the legal profession and beyond.